You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? I don't care if I'm in the middle of the police department. I will break your jaw the next time I see you. This is on a recorded line. Mark my words. You want to call my bluff again like you did last night?
The chilling audio, documented in a 2020 USA Today story, details a call to domestic violence survivor Lena Hale, who lives in Florida. The male voice on the phone call, recorded by Lena, is that of her former husband, who, despite battering Lena for years, managed to get full custody of their then 3-year-old daughter. What's more, according to the USA Today report, Lena's daughter and son from a previous relationship were first placed in Child Protective Services on the claim that Lena didn't protect them from witnessing the violence. Lena is not alone, nor is Florida when it comes to issues plaguing America's child welfare system. Statistics show that Black and brown domestic violence victims lose custody of their children at a far much higher rate than whites, often while still dealing with the personal trauma of being abused. According to a study by Washington University in St. Louis, 53% of Black children will be the subject of an investigated CPS case before their 18th birthday. These domestic violence survivors being victimized yet again, along with their children, typically have no voice, no support system, and no means to fight the deep-seated racial disparities that confront them in the system. Therefore, these efforts to keep or regain custody of their children is often bleak. These troubling dynamics where domestic violence and the child welfare system intersect birth a new cohort that offers a new sense of hope in the effort to keep survivors and their children together in a safe environment. The coalition, Women Transforming Families, rising to end violence, oppression, and the legacy of trauma, is the second generation of an initiative that was started in 2019 and was fully activated in October of 2020. The project was formed in collaboration with UJIMA, a national domestic violence and sexual assault organization focused on protecting women and children of color.
There was a desire from one of the large organizations that works with child welfare and domestic violence. They are very focused on systemic change, and they wanted to sort of stick their foot in the puddle of change on the ground. The disproportionate level of Black and Indian children in child welfare is particularly meaningful. My sort of major focus was on organizing women of color. And I did it in Pennsylvania, and I did it in the national level, and, it became part of my, what do you call it, when you have the structure of your being, became a core issue for me. But the leaders who are available to women who desperately leave their homes with their children to escape violence. These women who we wound up with through this very, sort of informal but rigorous process that required them to be recommended by someone in the community who recognized their leadership.
Karma Kotman, executive director of UJIMA, says the Women Transforming Families initiative exemplifies the core ideas of how the organization approaches advocacy work around domestic violence and sexual assault.
The Women Transforming Families initiative is incredibly important because this is one of the first times that we have communities, particularly communities of color, taking control of the impact that the child welfare system has had in our communities, on our families. And it's really about amplifying the leadership of women in our communities. And when I say amplifying, so often people think they need to build the leadership within our communities. They talk about increasing the capacity of the leadership in our communities. And what we've done with this project is say that leadership already exists. This is really about amplifying that leadership and giving it voice.
One of the greatest strengths of the cohort is the diversity within the group and the unique sense of passion they all bring to the work they do as advocates for women and children of color.
When we talk about working with communities of color, we have to recognize that communities of color is a very broad term. And we have to make sure that we're inclusive of those people who are representing the communities that we're seeking change for. And so within our cohorts, we have people who represent the Latinx community, people who represent the Black diaspora, and then also people who represent the Native American populations. That's important because when we look at those three populations, the disparity and disproportionality of the rates in which they are surveilled by and their families are separated by the child welfare system are highest in those communities. So we were very specific at who we wanted to be part of the membership for our cohorts.
The rich diversity of the cohort goes much deeper than the color or ethnicity of its members.
My name is Melissa Sampson Greer. I am Tri-Cities Leadership Cohort. With over 20 years of child welfare experience, I am committed to system change.
The Tri-Cities Leadership Cohort includes Portland, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, a state that has come under heavy scrutiny for the disparities in how they handle Child Protective Services cases.
I haven't seen one valid case yet of true child neglect or abuse. And I take the words from one of our mentors, Judge Thorne. The only two reasons he would remove a child is for death of a parent by the other parent or sexual assault to a child. Everything else does not merit removing a child from their home. I agree with that. As a sexual assault survivor and person, you can get through it. I mean, you don't have to. I wasn't removed. I was in a white family and wasn't removed. That gives you the idea right there of how unbalanced the justice system is. But I don't think that there's anything right now that I've worked with that warrants a removal of a child.
Although children are often removed from the home for the wrong reasons, the Women Transforming Families cohort acknowledges that there are times when a child might need to be placed in a safer environment. The mission to keep families together and safe involves prioritizing the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the child, which often gets overlooked by the system.
What angers me is I look back on my case and how my investigation started because I got a criminal charge for possession of drugs. And yet the investigator didn't feel at the time that my case warranted my daughter being removed from my care. But the minute I told her that she was sexually molested by somebody that I knew, immediately they removed her from my care.
But
she was in imminent harm and danger at that point.
Yeah, you weren't the perpetrator.
I wasn't the perpetrator. It didn't happen in my home. And, it was a trusted friend.
And that's one of the things that's wrong with the system is that you don't vet whoever gets to report. So you don't get to see what their intentions are. You just merely you find yourself being responsible to answer to these allegations, but you don't even know why. It could be a scorned ex-lover or a
angry neighbor,
yeah,
whatever.
But what goes deeper is that this is a continuation of genocide. This system was designed the way it is to eradicate us, which was the plan when they touched here. So I don't see any system that isn't done by us to work for us.
Detroit Divas is what they call themselves, and they are involved in domestic violence and child welfare advocacy work in a city and state that has a long troubled history when it comes to protecting women and children of color.
Stripping down brown paper bag and twisting them into rollers for our curls on picture day. And I saw her rubbing our elbows and our ankles with Crisco so we could look like brand new. And I saw her on one leg with one egg to steal a bottle and or beg. I saw her once fit a square-shaped problem into a rounded peg, looking for a solution. Evolution has been good to her. Superwoman, she be the answer for the weary, clearly tackling the world with a spatula and a frying pan, and degrees come in the form of a bachelor's or a master's plan. But sometimes a woman is in need of her Bible and a day to try to pry it from her hands, or she might be the chanting kind. I said she might be the chanting kind, chanting kind, chanting.
Working to keep the families of survivors together in Detroit poses a host of unique challenges, especially given the high number of domestic violence and sexual assault cases in the predominantly black city.
The tongues of some folks that name her offspring Tayshawn, Cadillac, or Rashay. Well, I say we need to heed the power of that sister anyway, as she shines when the world wants her to fade. She never whines when it's her time to cascade and descend upon her throne to receive her crown on her own. And she grown and she prone to hide your back cause she down like that. And when we lack the skills to build and be productive, that sister shows up seductive enough but never too much and lucky, got nothing to do with it. She be a black woman and blessed. A black woman at her best. She won't stop to rest and she wears her armor on her chest. So don't worry because the work is already done. The fight is already won. She be the almighty deliverer of your daughters and your sons. And sometimes, y'all, sometimes, for your mama, your sister, your grandma, your auntie, any black woman, you have to R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Get it?
Some of the challenges the cohorts face in their respective communities as advocates of domestic violence survivors dealing with child welfare cases are different.
We need resources.
Because that's what we talk about all the time.
Every day. My name is Erica Murria. I am an emerging leader with the Detroit Divas. DIVA stands for Detroit Informing Change with Our Voices and Actions.
We create the Underground Railroad to pull miracles and, partner with community grassroots organizations that does the similar work so that we can save these women and these babies.
That part.
Sounds like an African principle to me where we turn nothing into something and figure it out. But it would be really ideal if we had some intentional funding set aside just for us to get the word out, to develop programming, to do technical assistance, to do trainings, to raise awareness in our communities about it. I'm glad you started with funding.
Like, how did you figure out this format? How did you figure out how to download that? And had to work together to try to compete. To be able to get the money that we needed.
And you can't help as many people. Well, we can and we do with absolutely nothing, right? But just imagine what we can do if we were actually funded.
It's a matter that is being driven by a system that is based in providing services for mainstream communities. It's it's still really based in this white supremacist outlook of what it's supposed to look like. And so if we say it's supposed to satisfy the white community, then it automatically then negates what we need here in our community. And so what we do here for the Black community looks different than what is done in other communities. It's not saying that it won't necessarily work in other communities, but that our history, our experience, our love, our healing process is based on the fact that we are dealing with intergenerational historical issues that have impacted our lives today, that still impact our lives today.
And the fact when you do the cookie cutter, what you're doing is now you're telling me what I need to do and what my healing looks like and the steps in the treatment plan that I need to take from your perspective. But not one moment have you ever walked in these shoes. Not one moment have you ever stood up and woke up in my skin. So you have no idea of what the impact of what you're telling me to do and how much more you're traumatizing me to the point that I'm just going to shut down and say, okay, I just need a place to sleep.
And then I'm leaving.
And I'm hungry right now, so let me eat this sandwich real quick. Let me get my kids, we're safe right now, okay? Just shh, do what she say, and we're gone.
Other challenges that the cohorts face in their respective communities are quite similar.
not only is it a lack of training, but you're having to undo a culture, right? So when I was trained as an investigator, it was the culture of the agency. And then when you talk about, probably up until recently, when you had so many tenured people, if we were all trained in this culture, that even when you do the Safe Families and other trainings, you're still not undoing the culture piece of it, right? So we were all still brought in with this mentality of neglectful supervision, unprotected parent, and then, you know, bring in what we grew up with, or at least people like me grew up with, which was, well, why are you still there, you know, and that sort of thing, that the training by itself doesn't get us there. That's because the agency culture, and I would say for CPS across the country, is so ingrained in what intimate partner violence is, and nobody really actually does a lot to talk about what it is.
And if you're thinking about it too, we can go back even further to intake, mandated reporters, because in Texas, they, for so long, and it's still the practice to mark them as a perpetrator. And so once you check that box, you actually can't uncheck it. And so if we go back even more, law enforcement. And at least here in Austin, it's not Texas law, but their policy to call child welfare if there's a child. Not even if there's a child hurt, or if there's it's just if there's a child.
And then both of those systems impact DV providers, because one, they also need training on CPS systems, right? So they don't know what they can and can't do, or how to properly advocate for them, because then CPS is shutting them down, saying no, the law says, and so their hands are tied. And then they're also responsible for following state protocol. So the law says I have to call 911 on you. So now you have agencies calling 911, agencies calling CPS, and and it's just that cycle of harm that's just that continues to perpetuate systems and cause more unintentional harm in communities, and drive communities and survivors further away from asking for help.
Then they land in the court systems, right?
Yes.
And then they're navigating not just the child welfare system, but the criminal justice system. They're having to figure out how to get through both in the least harmful way. And especially when we don't have judges or other lawyers who are trained as well, then we end up causing more trauma in both ends. Trying to administer justice. And so I think that always, to me, is such a problematic piece, is when justice is causing trauma.
By the time the legal case is filed and they're in the court system and I'm appointed as the attorney, if I'm representing the mother who has been, deemed to be neglectful in her supervision and have her kids removed, the whole trauma of having your child removed, you are the survivor of domestic violence, not really getting the resources or the, the attention that you need. It's a difficult process for parents. It really, really is.
The cohort's work is deeply rooted in coming up with unconventional ways to advocate for survivors of color and their children while dealing with America's systemic racism.
But the Indian child removal has been happening for eons, and nothing has changed. The numbers haven't gotten better. If anything, they've gotten twice as worse.
I think it's more awakening of our people is what will carry us on. Changing the system will not. Right. We need to awaken and realize that we are the prayers that our grandfathers prayed for, and revitalize our abilities and our spirit, the spirit of our ancestors.
Melissa of Portland sees the cohort playing an important role in helping to change those dynamics.
I think one of the key pieces to looking at the collective and bringing different voices together in the work that we're doing is that that's a piece that has been missing for a number of years. And so throughout my career, it really has been very state focused and white dominant culture and organization focused. And so this collective has really allowed us to bring the expertise, the lived experience from those most impacted by the system. And so to see the wealth of knowledge that our cohort has brought from across the nation really is the future. For us to make system change, we have to have those voices at the table to really impact policy and procedure and practice.
Every one of the cohorts involved in Women Transforming Families, whether their advocacy work is rooted in the east side of Detroit, east of I-35 in Austin, or near George Floyd Square in Minneapolis, has brought something unique to the group. And that uniqueness includes the rich diversity of the cohort's experiences as advocates. Maricarmen Garza brings 20 years of legal expertise to the Women Transforming Families initiative.
I do this work because it's important. My undergraduate was child psychology, and immediately after college, I worked at a residential treatment center for emotionally disturbed adolescents. My goal was to help children navigate the system and help them and encourage them to do better. But my experience showed me, even back then as a young, 20-something-year-old, that what I needed to do really was change the system. There was no amount of counseling that I could do to change the circumstances. So that is what motivated me to go to law school. And Texas Ways and the work that we're doing is helping me be true to my promise to really change those systems.
Melissa Sampson Greer's experiences lie in the intersectionality of oppression and the role of institutionalized racism in systems.
I started working for child welfare actually for one of the Oregon tribes in their child welfare system. I just applied, and I was actually still attending Washington State University. And it was a new position. So I thought, I'll just apply and go through the interview process and start to get that experience. And then they called me and said, you got the job. And I just laughed and said, well, I actually don't even graduate for 3 more months. And they said, it's okay, it's a new position, we'll wait for you. And what I found out as I transitioned over is we had tribal elders within that tribal unit that were really looking for new, what would I say, like the younger generation to come in and start, and then sort of have that mix of those with the wealth of knowledge, but then those who are newer generation. And I worked there for over 10 and a half years. And then got brave and transitioned over to the state system and started within community engagement on a national project. And so I helped with community engagement and tribal engagement on that project, and then transitioned into the state child welfare system, but not within direct care, more at the central office level, where I led their racial equity efforts for over 10 years.
Judge Aurora Martinez Jones advocates for change in her work that is anchored in the courtroom.
As a lawyer, I was really looking at my opportunities, and an opportunity came to me to become a judge. I did become a judge, and as a judge, it was really interesting and important for me to see the difference that I can make on the bench, but I knew there was still so much work that I needed to do to grow so that I could make decisions that were safe and helpful. I knew the perspective I had wasn't the only perspective, and being a part of a group like this one was able to help me understand different perspectives so that I can make good decisions for the families that appeared in my court.
Kimberly Vincent's efforts to help keep families together has revolved around helping women navigate the child welfare system as a court-appointed attorney.
The reason why I do this work is because Black and brown families are overrepresented in the child welfare space. And this work is important because parents and children need to see more attorneys that look like them. The cases really involve a lot of time and attention by the attorney. It's not just the legal aspect. There are a lot of other things that we do. There's a social work aspect to what we do. Sometimes I spend a lot of time helping my clients find community resources. There's a lot of layers to each and every one of the cases. There are mental health issues, there are drug-related issues, domestic violence issues. So it really takes a legal advocate a lot of time to, in my opinion, really represent their clients well.
The personal stories of perseverance as survivors, shared among many of the cohorts, has also added a very unique element to the group. Renisha Odorji, who leans on her past experiences as a survivor to help other victims of domestic violence, is one example.
My personal experiences have really shaped me for this work in more ways than I could ever describe to you on a Zoom call. But I will say experiencing intimate partner violence in my own relationship, in my marriage, really has given me a newfound sense of empathy for women as it relates to broken relationships. Simultaneously, as I was going through a dissolving marriage, I was also going through working at a very toxic environment that really presented its own challenges. And so I love the butterfly because I feel like I was in a cocoon for about 2 years, and now I'm kind of busting out of that chrysalis and really forming my wings to fly. And it was this whole process that really has shaped me to just be a better advocate and a better, just overall human, to understand things on a very deeper level as it pertains to relationships and just violence. And so I can't let those experiences that have shaped who I am go to waste, because I believe that everything is for a purpose. And so I went through that so that I can help somebody else get through those storms.
Eloise Cepeda's story as a survivor and a mother who now works to address the intersection of domestic violence and the child welfare system on a more grassroots level has been a source of inspiration as well.
On a personal level, I'm driven by personal experience. I know what I needed as a child. I know what I needed as an adult out there in communities such as mine, marginalized communities. And I know the difference between available and accessible. And although resources are available, they're not always accessible. And I know that there's been this huge gap from community to resources and community to service providers. And that gap has been caused by distrust. I'm driven because I've also seen people come into our communities and say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z for you, and then not do that. I know what it feels like to be used. I know what it feels like to be abandoned. And I know what it feels like to be unheard and unseen. And so I'm driven by all of that. I became a teen parent at 16. And I was in the cycle, and I felt safe at the time by my gangbanger boyfriend who promised me protection, right? I'm going from not feeling safe and not feeling protected to needing to be protected. And that when that table turned and that script flipped on me, then I became the victim all over again. And I remember people asking me why I didn't leave. I remember them asking me, why do I take him back? And I remember the lack of understanding to be able to say, you don't know what I have to live through in order for my kids to be safe, or even for you to be safe. And I remember Also, that when I did ask for help, there was sometimes some shame that came with that, or being shamed. Well, why didn't you leave sooner? Or I told you so. And so I'm driven because of all of those barriers between people who can help and the people who need help, but then also within our own people. There's also healing in our own communities that need to happen, empowerment in our own communities that need to happen. When I was sexually assaulted, it was a community member who found me. When I finally was able to leave, it was community members who provided safe haven for me. I never called the 800 number because I didn't trust them. They hadn't shown up before, so why was I to believe that they were going to show up now? So why do I do what I do? Because I know what it's like to be on the other side. I know what it's like to have nothing and not believe that what people told me they were doing for me was true.
The group has also been fueled by the stories of other WTF cohorts like Erica Maria, whose advocacy work has been entrenched in her experiences as a Black domestic violence survivor and a mother in Detroit.
I do this work as a domestic violence advocate and a policy reform advocate because I'm a survivor of violence. And I didn't feel that I had a voice or that anyone was able to advocate for me in the way that I needed or on the level that I needed. I'm thankful for the opportunities to sit in national rooms and be heard and bring small children's voices, single mothers' voices, sad wives' voices, abused men's voices, elderly people's voices, the Black community's voice to the table, to be heard and understood and respected, and to be cared for, to be nurtured. I think we all deserve those things.
Teresa Nord, a survivor who once had her own child taken away by CPS, has brought an entirely different perspective to the group.
So in Minnesota, we have the second highest rate of removal of Native American families, meaning Native American children are removed 22 times more than a Caucasian family. Montana has the highest, which is 25 times more likely to be removed and placed in a non-foster or non-native foster home. So having such high rates in Minnesota of children in out-of-home placement, yet we have the ICWA Law Center here in Minnesota, and we also have specialized ICWA courts in Minnesota, which aren't really prevalent throughout the United States. So there's always that question of, well, why? If we have such a recognized ability in our state for family preservation, why are families still being torn apart? Why are children still in out-of-home placement?
The Women Transforming Families cohort has been empowered by each of its members' unique sense of purpose as well. Shelley Ryan has been driven to a large extent by a desire to help white communities understand the complexities and disparities of the child welfare system when it comes to communities of color.
This work is personal to me because I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and my home wasn't safe. The work I do is important because domestic violence programs and child welfare need to know how to support families, survivors, and their children, and how to hold the right people accountable. And that includes not taking children of color out of their home if they're perfectly safe in their home. Why we need to shine a light is because we spent hundreds of years ignoring that this is a problem. One of the things that I see more and more is white people like myself see a family and think because it's different than their family or the way that they were raised, that that's actually unsafe or a problem. And it's actually not. Safety
issue is a safety issue. And growing up in a family that looks different than you, or even has different values, different culture, different practices than you, that's a family. That's supportive, and that's where kids need to stay.
Lachetta Johnson's purpose is deeply rooted in her faith as a survivor and foster care specialist.
I think it was my purpose. It wasn't something that I woke up and said, I want to do this. I truly believe that this was something that God called me to do. I'm a survivor of childhood domestic violence, witnessing it. I'm a survivor of domestic violence from a relationship. And I was the survivor that didn't even know I was in a domestic violence relationship. And as time grew, different career paths, different career opportunities, they all linked around protecting children, protecting women, victims, survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So I truly believe it was a calling that God put on me to do this work.
Tanya Rollins is driven by her experiences as someone who once worked in the system.
One of my primary motivations for doing this work, they are my great nieces and nephews, and the hope that when they are my age, when they are 52, they will not have to be engaged in the same conversations, in the same work, and still fighting for basic equality and equity in America. So that's my primary motivation, as well as the fact that I started working in the system at 21. And when I think of the damage that I did unintentionally to children and families, and specifically Black, brown, and indigenous children and families in this country, it hurts. And so I do this work to work towards changing a system that is a system that often goes unchecked.
The depth of the cohort's passion as family advocates has been one of the things that has made the Women Transforming Families initiative most unique. Payne's passion for this work is greatly driven by a deep desire to honor the spirit of her ancestors and acknowledge the long history of abuse the Native community has suffered.
Well, when I talk about the work that I do and how it fuels me and where it comes from, and where it's more of a, an anger based, that it's still a passionate place, but it reminds me as an adopted child, this is all just a form of genocide. This is a continuation of the erasure of our people. And so if you look at history, like the whole reason why ICWA was even created in 1978 is that we were being taken at such a high rate for the smallest things. But in my opinion, that is to erase the hurt that was caused to the people of Turtle Island. Because if we're gone, then we don't have to speak about what happened when they got here, when the settlers got here. And so I keep that very close to me in the pain that I carry with me, or the hurt or the anger, whatever you want to call it. For me, that's where the passion lies. I have to be, my spirit has to be awakened that way to remember that this is a form of genocide. This is the continuation of it, because it's easier, like I just said, to have us gone than it is to explain the hurt and the savagery of what they did when they got here.
Kalima Johnson feels compelled to work with other survivors of violence, not only because she is a survivor herself, but also understands it from a system and community standpoint.
Yes, my personal motivation for doing this work is that I am a survivor of sexual assault. I was sexually assaulted as a child by a family member, again as a teenager, and then again by the age of 19. And so I felt compelled to do the work because all of the experiences that I had within my community around these issues with my family and with systems, I felt compelled to do the work. So I do it for me, but I also do it for our community. I do it because I learned through experience how talking about these issues of violence against women in our community is difficult for a whole lot of reasons. And so I'm here to do it. I believe I was born to do it. It's important because in the African American community, we don't have many opportunities to talk about issues of violence in the family, violence in our communities other than violence that police commit against us. And so I feel like it's extremely important for Black folks to be able to heal and integrate the traumatic experience of sexual assault, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and anything that's related to that, emotional, verbal, and financial abuse. I think it's something that Black folks should be talking about because we deserve to be happy, we deserve to be whole, we deserve to heal, and we deserve to have each other in a safe and happy environment.
The initiative has been a great source of strength for the cohort's advocacy work, both collectively and individually.
It's always been about the women. And it's not about helping the women. It's not about educating the women. It's not about using the women to do, spots about domestic violence or child welfare or anything. It's about understanding and recognizing that emergent leadership. We called them emerging leaders. And in a way, I don't think the name makes sense because they are all leaders in their own way, in their own place, and in their own work and how they see themselves and are seen by others. Providing a platform, providing opportunities, but not trying to tell you what you already know. Trying to glean from them what they already know and give it back in different forms as they, evolve.
In the thick of COVID-19, the cohorts found themselves dealing with a host of new challenges to keep survivors and their children safe.
This is truly an unprecedented situation.
This virus doesn't discriminate. It attacks everyone.
I want every American to be prepared for the hard days that lie ahead.
Many of them delivered food and PPE to those in need in the midst of dealing with their own personal dilemmas. 23% of the cohorts had family members who died during the quarantine and pandemic. Sadly, a person who was scheduled to participate in the cohort succumbed to COVID-19. In the midst of it all, their virtual meets became a source of strength in helping them to get through the pandemic and continue their work. Still, whether it's the racial biases, cultural dynamics, rise in domestic violence cases, failing foster care systems, services that put profit over safely protecting youth, or the deaths of so many of the most young and vulnerable, the depth and far-reaching impact of it all can be too much for anyone to bear.
We begin tonight with that gut-wrenching new video at the center of the case of the death of a teenage boy. Good evening, I'm Alan Campbell.
And I'm Glenda Lewis. We do want to warn you, it is disturbing. The video shows the moments leading up to the death of the Detroit teenager who was restrained by staff in a Kalamazoo youth home.
It's now part of a $100 million lawsuit. 7 Action News reporter Darren Cunningham walks us through the
Just
tragedy.
before yesterday's verdict, a police officer shot and killed a 16-year-old black girl in Columbus, Ohio, saying she was threatening others with a knife.
Police body cam video shows Micaiah Bryant's final moments when a Columbus, Ohio police officer responding to a call gets out of his car and seconds later fatally shoots the 16-year-old girl.
50-year-old Gina Emanuel was supposed to protect her 3 adopted girls. Instead, detectives accuse her of abusing and neglecting the girls, leading to the death of her 7-year-old.
But the bond developed among the Detroit Divas, Texas Ways, and Tri-City cohorts has helped them cope with their own personal struggles associated with the work that they do.
So what I've had to learn how to do is to take care of myself. And what I do is I have people in my life, this group, definitely at the top of that list of supportive women who I can call on and lean on, or sometimes just take a break, and it's hard for me, but I have learned how to ask for what it is that I need. gone home to my poor husband and cried many days over, you know, different things that were going on in my cases, or, you know, an outcome that maybe wasn't the best for my client. So he has helped to, you know, wipe away those tears and be there for me. But it's tough because, you know, if you have a heart beating in your chest, you can't hear about kids being abused the way that we hear about on a daily basis, and that not take something out of you.
And I hear what you say, and I absolutely identify with that. And I can say, especially in my transition and my role to being, you know, the judge in this whole community responsible for all of these children, I always look at our data on how many kids we have, because I go to sleep thinking, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for 1,600 kids. I am responsible for them. And then I start thinking about who are my kids that need me the most, my kids who are sleeping in offices, who are in the psychiatric hospitals, who ran away and I don't know what's going on. It keeps me up. And I know I have such passion and desire to do something, and I call Tanya and I say, Tanya, I have an idea. And sometimes I have to be,
I have
an idea.
I have an idea. And sometimes I have to be told, you know, you can't save the whole state. I say, but I am responsible for this community, and I'm responsible for my role and what I do.
The women have also found a renewed sense of strength through the cohort to more freely deal with their own personal trauma in their own unique ways. Take, for example, the poem that Lachetta Johnson wrote, detailing her legacy of trauma.
I love my parents. I love them. Abusive, aggressive, mean, mad, passionate, caring, loving, soft, protective, deep, strong, faithful, God-fearing. I love my father. I love him. I remember waking up to loud booms, running toward the sound to see my father sitting on top of my mother, choking her face bleeding. Me crying, saying, Daddy, stop, get off my mama. Hearing my mama plead with my father, saying, please stop, she's right here. I hear the sounds of scuffling, crying, grunting, cussing, hate, being kidnapped. But was I really? I was playing a game with my father. He and I sat on the front floor of the front floor seat while his friend drove. Who could be the stillest was the name of the game. And you know I won. I love my father. I love him. I remember being pulled out of a slowly moving car by my mother. As we ran, no, she ran. I was dragged, all in an attempt to catch the nearest bus. I remember sitting in the front seat of my aunt's car, my parents fighting again, and my mother pulling out of the driveway, and my father throwing a brick into the passenger side window, just missing me, and now I'm covered in glass, not understanding why they fight. I love my mother. I love her. I remember going to church, being taught about God, being baptized, being loved. I remember my father's hugs and his kisses, him running through the house playing with me. I remember him buying me everything and telling me I was his joy. I remember him opening the doors for me, him sharing, being kind and caring, loving me, but I don't remember them ever loving each other. I love my mother. I love her. I remember being told, you better not go to school and say nothing. What goes on in my house stays here. You better not tell no one my business. I remember being silent. I remember keeping secrets. I love my mother. I love her. She's on the phone again, crying, calling family to come get us. I can't believe he did this again. Her pain, her hurt. My mama's crying, so I'm crying. I love my mother. I love her. I remember being at family's houses. They comfort her. I'm told to go in the room and play and don't come out. But I have to use the bathroom, and it so happens to be near the living room. So I can see them surrounding her. I can see them wiping her tears. No one surrounds me. No one wiped mine. We're going to stay with family for a while. I can't see my father or talk to him. I know he's calling because of the look on everyone's face when the phone rings, and I'm rushing into the room to play. No, just go outside and play. Oh, look, there's my daddy. I love my mother. I love her. Running through the house, laughing and playing, and being told to sit your tail down and shut up now. Feeling the anger, the regret, the pain, the hate. She's always yelling at me. Do she love me? Do she even like me? What did I do? I love my mother. I love her. She doesn't play with me. She won't talk to me. She's so angry. No hugs, no kisses, no I love you. Am I her gloom? Am I the reason they're fighting? I remember being 6 years old. I love my parents. I love them.
For some of the ladies, it has been more of an internal personal restoration.
I feel I have the privilege to be able to put it aside. Many families don't, and I feel that on me. Like, we get to go home, we get to go to our families. That's not the same for everybody else. So I do feel a responsibility because I have the ability to do something to change things, to keep working at it. And of course, being surrounded by colleagues who also feel exactly the same way, like, I feel like we're gonna make a difference. So it does feel hopeful to me to be talking to others who care as passionately about this issue, and that fills me up. You know, I feel like nothing is impossible despite how hard this work is.
The freedom to share all those unique experiences and perspectives has created a deep bond of sisterhood that gives them the strength to continue to do the work that they do.
And for me, this has been just such a rewarding experience, you know, because after 30 years of things not changing, you get kind of, I mean, I've been doing AIDS where I did AIDS work for 10 years, and I, you know, was a bit out of the, you know, sort of movement for a long time. So, and coming back in, I'm sort of like, okay, let's see, what are you really willing to do? What are you really willing to do? And I found out what can be done when you create a structure in which women can make their own decisions, can learn to do new things. If they, you know, they can learn to do new things that then can be applied in all levels of the work they do.
The Women Transforming Families cohort has proven to be a very powerful means of renewal for everyone involved, says Umi.
Having the cohorts, having these individual collective teams that are based in 3 different cities, then they have a way of supporting each other within the work that they're doing. We don't want one person to be in a community doing this work, is facing all of these hard challenges, and then having to deal with that on their own. They have to build constituencies within that community. So while we have different numbers of people in each communities, part of what we know that we're moving towards is expanding what that is, expanding that sisterhood that's internal within each organization or each cohort.
Kaylin Foy, a U.S. Virgin Islands-based mentor for the Detroit Divas, speaks to many of the sentiments that Umi shared.
I was really proud to be a part of this great project, helping Black victims of domestic violence who also are dealing with the child protective system and finding ways and solutions to help with the problems that were presented and that were explored during this project.
Karma Kottman says programs like the cohort are really paramount to addressing the issues associated with keeping survivors and their children together and safe.
Through this initiative, what we have seen is that this is not a small thing, right? That when we look at the communities that we're talking about, the African American community, the Latinx community, the Native American community, that we are at large overrepresented in the child welfare system. And that's not just in Detroit, that's not just in Texas, that's not just in Minneapolis, that's here in Washington, DC, that's in, anywhere that you go across the country. And so what we need is this same level of investment in our community so that we can take leadership.
As the program draws to a close, Catlin sees the Detroit Divas, Texas Waves, and Tri-Cities leadership cohorts as the beginning of something much bigger.
To build out the work that we've started in these 3 sites and to engage the women who have been part of this cohort, to engage them in another level of mentorship within these sites, and to find some more grassroots leaders like them to, sort of join in the process of learning. And, it won't always be virtual sharing, but we really see focusing on the 3 sites that exist and engaging and, continuing to be a part of the lives and having their leadership for the fellows, the members of the cohort as it is now. None of that, thank you for your service, bye-bye. We're in it to, work with these sites and these women, even if there's no funding. I mean, they got my phone number. They got Umi's phone number, and they use it, as they need. And, somehow there's going to be an ongoing process to support them. It may be run by somebody else. It may be, sort of new people. But our position is that if you put money into something and you put, your heart and your spirit into a project and into these women, to throw it away is tragic, and I just don't think and these women, because they are fighters and because they are connected with one another, will find a way to move forward with the work, because that's what it's all about, right? Whether it's your day job or not.